Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. I'm delighted today to have with me Mike Laven. Mike is the CEO of CurrencyCloud. Thanks, Mike, for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Mike, and it was great to have you on the show because I know you've got a really fascinating business across multiple countries. Mike, why don't you just give us, our listeners, a quick introduction about who CurrencyCloud are and what your role is?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO. We are a cross-border B2B technology company. That means that we work in the world of cross-border payments and collections, but we sell infrastructure. So, for example, Revolut, who a lot of people know, Monzo, Starling Bank, most of the neobanks use us for some or all of their cross-border payments. So we don't market directly to end users, so you might not have seen our name if you're in the cross-border payments business, but you've probably used our technology. By the close of this year, we'll have about 350 customers. We'll have raised around $100 million worth of investment capital, probably 250 people, growing another 100 next year. So we were one of the leaders of the London FinTech revolution back in 2012 and 2013, and it's been all uphill since then.
Amazing, and it's great, as you say there. You're not perhaps on the front line in the spotlight all the time, but you're certainly there behind the business. And out of interest, how did the business come to life? How did that come about?
So there were some technical founders who, in 2011, had an idea about that small businesses were not being taken care of in terms of cross-border payments. So there's a lot of firms, good firms, have come up with the same perception, but looking at consumers. But we came up with the same perception, but looking at small businesses. And then servicing small business is harder. It's harder because the requirements may differ from business to business. It's harder because there are data requirements and timing requirements that are different than consumers. So when we looked at that business problem, it became clear that we had to be a technology-led company rather than very much a consumer-oriented company. So it was started from the initial perception that businesses were not being taken care of in the international payments market. And it's a very similar way to other companies looked at that in terms of consumers.
Fantastic. And I know you've got 4 office locations, I think Amsterdam, New York, Cardiff as well, and of course London. Is that right?
Yes, very much. Our headquarters are in London. We are actually been growing quite a lot in Cardiff lately. An office in Amsterdam, which is growing quite well, and the same with New York.
Brilliant. Well, look, that's amazing. Look, I'm going to jump straight into the questions, if that's all right with you, Mike. Can you share with our listeners what a typical day in the business looks like for you?
Sure. So we are a daily processing business. That means on a daily basis, or if you look at it on a month, we're processing maybe close to $1.5 billion a month, 400 to 500,000 transactions. And so there's a real rhythm here of the day. There's a large part of the day around the office is a daily processing business, which is full of all sorts of daily concerns. So my day is probably spent a third thinking about that. And then, of course, trying to think on a larger time horizon than just a day. What do we do for a month? What do we do for a year? What do we do for 3 years? Really thinking about how do we staff. In the end, to me, it's always only about people. How do we have the right people coming in and the right management going forward? But because it's a daily processing business, there's a beat by, a musical beat to the business that's really, and you can feel it when you walk in the office. This is an office that has to measure its life daily because our customers are sending payments that need to get there now and today, and that gives us sort of a daily rhythm to what's going on inside the business.
Brilliant. What is there a person perhaps that has had an impact on you as a leader? Obviously, you've had the business now for over 7 years. How has that person, perhaps, or those people impacted your life and the way you do business?
So, I don't think of that as business people. I learned from sports figures. If, people often ask me who I would emulate, and I'd always tell them I'd emulate Roger Federer. Patient. One of the things in our business, because it's a daily processing business, and because we're connected to lots of pieces of the world's infrastructure, there's always something going on to which you have to react to. So one of the keys to running the currency cloud, where we live in an environment that's volatile, it's uncertain, is you need to be calm and measured. And you need to make sure you have the processes and the infrastructure and the people so that as the world's chugging along around you, you can do the right thing in a calm and measured fashion. There's continually some part of the world is having a problem every day that could impact our business. You have to be able to think through that and to be calm and measured in how you're doing it. So I always watch the way Federer, plays the point, calm and measured, wins the match. To me, that's the model.
Fantastic. What do you do to keep your employees engaged, particularly as a fast-growing business? And what are you doing particularly from the top?
So listen, employee engagement is something we monitor. Employee engagement surveys, a big one every year, a smaller one every 6 months, ENPS. We're now big enough so that we can look at that by departments and divisions. I think when we were smaller, for the purpose of anonymity, we couldn't do that. And then we think about in communication. People want to know what's going on with the company. Senior managers want to know more. So we've got a whole infrastructure of communication, whether it's weekly all hands, monthly, more broadcast oriented, quarterly leadership meetings. So to me, the engagement part is really all about how we communicate and who we communicate to. So we've got a very much tiered structure of letting leadership know a lot, but letting everybody else know a lot as well. We try to be as transparent as possible with what we're doing.
Fantastic. And before I forget, Mike, I did mean to ask you, what was I know you've obviously launched your CurrencyCloud SPARC. I was just curious if you could just share what that actually means, and perhaps what were the challenges in putting that in place, particularly across multi-countries?
Yeah. So SPARC is effectively a wallet that allows our customers to pay in other words, for us to collect money from their customers, to store the money with us in multiple currencies, and pay out. It came out of starting our collections business, in other words, to receive money on the part of our customers. The challenges there are both technical, contractual, and compliance oriented. When you're receiving money from third and fourth parties, then you have to pay it out to third and fourth parties. There's a series of data requirements to do it correctly. So it's been quite a long process to get it correct. We had to get both the technology, though the technology has been difficult, but the technology has to go along with the data and the compliance issues. Again, if you're in the consumer market, it's somewhat different, but because as I'm servicing customers or servicing their customers, bringing SPARC to market is sort of a confluence of technical, contractual, legal, and compliance-oriented that all has to be rolled out at the same time. We've just announced it in the last couple of days. It's been in beta in various forms for quite some time. We now feel comfortable about rolling it out to our user base and rolling it out beyond that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a fantastic achievement for all those different parts of the organization to come together. So well done on that. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing business leaders today?
Oh, listen, besides Brexit, which, we don't want to talk about, I suppose. So for business leaders, listen, in my industry, it is a payment industry. And we are subject to the world's macroeconomic changes. So when there's uncertainty in the world, it affects exchange rates. When it affects exchange rate, it affects how people pay and what they do and how businesses behave. So we have to live in an uncertain environment. So to me, the greatest thing is uncertainty. Of course, if there was certainty, we might get bored. But our greatest challenge is living in a time where you've got political and economic uncertainty. And in the payments business, that flows through to your business daily.
Mm. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Be patient.
Is that coming from Roger Federer?
No, it comes from lots of people, but be patient and thoughtful. We have the right business idea. We know what we're doing. We're aggressive. We follow. We're mission driven. We follow the mission. But we believe in what we're doing, and we have to be patient in terms of getting there.
That's great. On top of that, then, and we obviously talked about the challenges facing business leaders, but what really excites you about your industry right now?
Oh, listen, I think we're solving an incredibly important problem. The world is, in terms of data, in terms of finance, in terms of people, is massively interconnected and gets more interconnected. Though you may read things, about Brexit or about Trump, in fact, the level of connectivity only increases with data and money and people crossing borders in a way that was sort of unimaginable 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And whether it's, billions of users of Facebook or people with Alibaba or wallets in Africa, so the level of interconnectedness gets greater and greater. The infrastructure to help people live that interconnected life, whether it's supplying bicycle parts from Thailand to the UK or supplying bicycle parts from the UK to Thailand, isn't there at the same level that the data and the infrastructure has moved. So what's exciting is we're dealing with a real life problem, again, at the business level, of getting the world's infrastructure to move money around at the same level that data and capital have moved around. And moving money around just isn't there in the same way, and there's still a long way to go.
People talk about well-being quite a lot, obviously, at the moment. This is obviously a big thing in the industry. What do you do? What do you do to help your employees improve and maintain their well-being?
So it's something we think a lot about that. I think well-being, sustainability, those kinds of things are incredibly important. For example, we offered everyone in the company the day off to attend the climate change rallies, whenever that was a couple of weeks ago in London. It was something incredibly important to our mostly millennial staff, and the company was right behind that, and we gave people the time off to do it. And a lot of them took it and did that. So we think about well-being. We have a group of HR people. Well-being is on the agenda, whether it's mindfulness or how we approach our jobs. Listen, our success is based on the quality of the people we have and how successful they are when they come to the office and what they do. So thinking about well-being is something on the top of our agenda.
I didn't touch on this earlier, but we talked about that engagement piece. And what have you seen perhaps as the challenges as well around keeping everyone engaged? Are you doing anything clever around keeping people involved who are in different offices and video conferences? How are you doing anything smart around that works well for you?
Well, I'm not sure if it's any smarter than anybody else, but we have to pay attention to it. Listen, as we grow and we want to have a culture, there's a clear culture here. It's very inclusive. It tends to be relatively open. We have a lot of young managers who've come up, pushed up through the growth of the company, and we want to maintain that across London, Cardiff, Amsterdam, and New York as the company grows. So we want to have a consistent corporate culture. That just doesn't happen by itself. And so whether it's it all comes back to communication. We're values driven. There's a values set. We publicize the values. We look at hiring relating back to those values. We look at evaluations back to those values. We deal with the very interesting issue that when you look at the world of development, by development I mean R&D, and what the company does, we've brought that down to sprints. And so the world of agile development is 2-week sprints, but the world of helping employees is annual. So there's a disconnect there, and we try to work on that. People who are here need a career path. We've thought a lot about that. So I have to say that when I look at, we've also recently hired a chief people officer so that the people side of the business gets particular attention. Again, our success going forward in the next 3 years, yes, of course, it's dependent on product, and yes, of course, it's dependent on customers and business model and things like that. But more importantly, as I'm in a pretty volatile part of the industry, what's most important is that the people are on their toes and the people are doing their job and happy to be here. And so we put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Mike, is there perhaps a story that you or something you could share from your childhood that may have influenced your work ethic in later life?
Well, listen, I came from, my dad was, in my family, everybody always worked. That's all I can say is my father worked incredibly hard. He had his own business. He left early in the morning. He came back late at night. My mother also worked from as early as I can remember. So there was always a culture of working, and then everybody coming together in the end of the evening and sort of eating together and being together. So from early in life, and then I actually started working on paid jobs from the time I was about 12, working in a local amusement park and anything that you could do. So there was always a culture of working, and a culture of playing too. So I think that was really the lesson.
What will your industry look like in 5 years' time, and how do you think that might impact your business model if you had a crystal ball?
So I think that the world gets more and more automated. Artificial intelligence makes our jobs better. It doesn't replace people here, because there's a series of things that we do that you have to use AI to make us smarter and smarter. So our industry gets increasingly global, increasingly distributed, as we deal with having to be a 24/7 company with global companies. I also think that you'll see lots of consolidation in the payments business because of the economies of scale to going back to where we are as a daily processor. That just gets cheaper and cheaper and more efficient the larger you are. So I think you'll start to see consolidation and globalization will just keep driving what we're doing.
If you had your time again and were given your 20-year-old self-advice, Mike, what's the one thing that you would say?
Practice the piano more. I'd be a musician.
Was that your second career choice? Or your first, I should say?
It was probably my first, but I didn't get around to it till 10 years ago.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for being so candid about your answers. If people want to find out more, if people want to connect and find out more about CurrencyCloud, find out more about you or connect with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, listen, they should come into the website. Info, if it's general things, jobs, it's there if they're looking for a job. I'm always available, and I'm easy to get from the website as well. But the best way is if you really want information of the company and you're looking at it on an employment basis, come into jobs at the CurrencyCloud. There's lots of jobs, and for those in their jobs that, I suspect we're hiring at least 100 people between now and in 12 months from now in various locations. So, we're always looking for good people. So if people are interested, they should come in.
Fantastic. Well, if anyone's listening to this, check out thecurrencycloud.com, and you can connect with Mike as well on LinkedIn, I'm sure, and write him a personalized message and tell you heard him on the podcast. So thanks, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us, and I wish you the best this year.
Thank you.
We really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to listen to more exclusive tips and life lessons from our guest, go to the resources page at vineresources.com.